He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
I can tell you what it's like to be at the fire line. You generally try to keep away from large flames. You attack the fire either from the back or from the flanks, so from the sides of the fire, because at the front of the fire the heat is so intense and the fire is spreading so quickly. It's insanely dangerous, and that's not a place where any human being should ever be.
Kia ora, nau mai haere mai ki te ao horihanga. Ko Ellen Rikers tēnei. Hello and welcome to Our Changing World. When you think of wildfires, you might think of our neighbours in Australia with their huge, intense bushfires.
The sky turned blood red in some areas as fires flared up in Victoria and New South Wales due to hot temperatures and dry conditions. And the fires continue.
Or perhaps you think of California with devastating fires razing whole suburbs.
The biggest of several wildfires still burning out of control in Los Angeles grew by more than 1,000 acres overnight.
But New Zealand experiences wildfires too. More than you think. More than 4,500 every year.
Blaze, which tore through 2,000 hectares of the Port Hills, is completely under control.
And the risk of wildfire in New Zealand is expected to increase. Climate change is leading to higher temperatures, stronger winds and lower rainfall in some places, which all amp up that fire risk. Researchers are keen to understand more about wildfires in New Zealand and help us get ready for that heightened fire risk. So today, I'm at the University of Canterbury in Ōtautahi Christchurch with PhD researcher and former firefighter Kate Melnick. The goal? To set some gorse on fire and watch it burn. So we've just rolled the door down. Whereabouts are we?
So we're at the University of Canterbury Fire Lab, and it's a pretty much brand new facility for testing fire behavior of both wildland fuels like gorse and other vegetation, as well as building fuels. So we have tested the flammability of couches and armchairs, and you could burn a vehicle in this lab if you wanted to, although that hasn't been done yet.
Wow, okay. So it's basically like a big sort of warehouse style lab rather than a shiny white surfaces type of lab.
Exactly.
And so we've got over there a large clump of gorse. How much gorse is sitting over there at the moment?
So there is 20 kilograms of gorse on the burner right now, which is equivalent to 2 square meters of gorse found in the natural space.
And where did it come from?
It came from the Waimakariri River, from the Willows Regional Park near West Melton.
Okay, and so who collects that for you?
I collect it.
Oh, you go out yourself? Okay.
Yes, I do. Yes. So it's a very hot and hard and prickly work, but it pays off eventually.
Right, and so I mean, is there anything you're looking for in a gorse bush?
Absolutely. I have very detailed criteria for picking gorse bushes because I try to learn about the fire behavior on a very fundamental level, so I try to be very particular about my samples. So for these experiments, I have 3 different types of gorse shrubs: short, medium, and tall. That particular one is tall.
And so you said it's going to be ignited with a 1 megawatt flame. I mean, what does that mean? How would that compare to like a gas burner in someone's house?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, it will be much bigger, let's say 100 times bigger or 50 times bigger than a gas burner. Okay. So if you were to take a armchair and set it on fire, and at the very peak of its burn, it would be about 1 megawatt, I would say.
Rather than throwing a match on it, it's sort of like turning on a gas hob, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And what's really exciting about the setup is that, to my knowledge, this is the first setup for testing wildfire fuels that simulates the conditions that actually happen in a real fire. So we have this flame that's really intense and is similar to what this bush would be experiencing in a wildland fire, and we see how it behaves in the lab.
What can we expect standing here? Like, will we feel the heat?
Absolutely. Standing here, we will feel a lot of radiant heat. So it's the heat that you actually feel on your skin. It will probably feel like sunshine on a very hot day. And what we can expect is once the flame ignites, it will engulf the whole gorse shrub. And then right away, the gorse will catch fire. And you can expect flame height to up to about 4 or 5 meters. So it will probably touch the ceiling. Yeah.
Wow. So you presumably have a fireproof ceiling.
Yes, absolutely. And the lab we're standing in, so it does look like a warehouse, and it has this big roller door, but it also is a really fancy apparatus in its own right. So it's interesting that you compared the test burner to a kitchen burner, like a hob, because above it there is this hood, which is similar to a stove range. And once we start the experiment, we will turn on the fan, and all of the gases, all of the smoke that will be coming off of the gorse bush will be going into the ceiling, into that hood, and the gases will flow towards the gas analyzer, and we will measure the exact concentration of carbon dioxide, oxygen, and carbon monoxide in the gases, and we will calculate how much energy is being released every second of the burn.
This huge high-tech range hood is called a large-scale calorimeter. It's a device for precisely measuring the energy, or calories, produced during the burn. Kate also uses infrared cameras to capture the temperature of the flames, and radiant heat flux sensors, which just detect how hot the fire is if you're standing next to it. The hood is switched on, and the countdown to ignition begins. The gorse goes up in a huge flame. It's like a roaring bonfire, sending a shower of glowing ash across the lab. The acrid smell of smoke permeates the air. Wow. You could definitely feel that kind of heat wash over you.
Yes. It's absolutely incredible. And like I said, it is similar to what the gorse would do in a real wildfire.
Wow, and it went so high in that sort of initial woof. Yeah, that's amazing. And it burns very quickly. Like it was kind of, I mean, it's now what? Just some charred twigs, really.
That's right. And we kept the burner on for 60 seconds because it is the approximate amount of time that it takes for a wildfire front to pass over a given area of vegetation. So we're trying to simulate that. And the reason why this shrub burned this quickly is because it was a little bit dry. It had lower moisture content. I collected it last week. So it had a little bit of time to dry, and basically it is representative of gorse in severe drought conditions. Would you like to get closer?
Yeah, let's have a look. Okay. Wow, so there's quite a bit of ash.
Yes, so what we see, so we got closer to the burner and we are taking a closer look, and what we see is there are remaining gorse twigs sticking out of the plant holders, and a lot of ash on the bottom. So all of the ash is the needles that burnt and fell to the ground, or some of them went in the air and now are peppered all over the lab. And then, there's some burnt twigs as well.
And a few little glowing spots as well. Some of the twigs there are still hot. Look like they're, red hot.
Absolutely, yeah. So we see some embers, and we also see some little red spots that are the firebrands. And in the real world, they would be picked up by the wind and carried elsewhere and would have potential to start a spot fire.
Right. And so how hot would that have gotten just then?
Approximately 1,000 degrees, maybe a little bit more than 1,000 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
Very hot.
I imagine 1,000 of those in front of you, like that's kind of how that big wildfire feels, you see what I mean?
That's Dr. Andres Valencia, Kate's supervisor. He takes us out of the lab to check out the smoke collecting apparatus, which is on the outside of the building. He points to some large pipes and cables that run from the top of the range hood that collects the smoke.
You see this cable that is there, that's where we actually take the gases and we use a gas analyzer to measure how much CO2, CO, and O2 is produced. And then we use this information to calculate how much energy is produced. And that's the main indicator of how dangerous is the fire, right? So the more oxygen is consumed during the combustion, the more heat is produced by the fire, and the more dangerous it is to people and communities. Okay. And then what we do is that we take the gases up there like this, and then we clean them up with a blast of water that we recycle. And then like this, we reduce potential pollution to the environment. And like this, we just make sure that whatever we burn doesn't pollute the environment. So this is kind of the main piece of equipment really from the lab. And that's why we can burn a lot of things in here, not only gorse. So for example, in our course 2 weeks ago, we burned like 3 couches as part of the demonstration.
I thought that was a University of Otago thing,
I
burning
heard
couches.
That. So I have a little story. I don't know if it's appropriate, but when I started teaching on 2020 here, I was talking about why it's important to burn couches as part of fire science, right? Like it's something that you can find in rooms everywhere, and you have the fabric and you also have the foam, which are very dangerous. And then if they ignite, they can produce fires that are really big, and they can actually produce fires that can go to other rooms. And I was talking about this, and then I saw all the students like kind of laughing a little bit, but like in secret, like, like what are you? Like, yeah. And then they start like talking about Dunedin, yeah. And then I start Googling it. Like, oh, okay. I don't know if we should actually keep doing this. Anyways, but we burn like something like 5 or 6 couches per year. And the students, they have to take data from those burns, and they have to use engineering principles to estimate how dangerous it is, this fire to people.
The team also used the lab to test smoke explosions. That involves creating a fire inside a small wooden box with holes poked in it. Eventually, the fire consumes all the oxygen in the box. And then, when it suddenly meets the air entering through those little pinholes, it goes boom! Heat is rapidly produced and smoke quickly escapes, travelling 5 or 6 metres per second. Then there are the fire tornadoes, which are literally what they sound like, a vortex of fire. Here in the lab, with a few well-positioned fans, they can recreate fire tornadoes up to 7 metres high, not just for fun, but to study their dynamics and properties. But not everything is big and flashy in fire science. We head upstairs to see a lab with a calorimeter for testing much smaller samples, just a few centimetres of foliage or a square of couch material, rather than a whole piece of furniture or a whole bush.
You will notice that it has that same hood set up as you saw downstairs, only on a very small scale. This one is about 50 by 50 centimeters or a little bit less. But the idea is the exact same. It's a calorimeter. It heats the fuel. You put a little sample of this size, 10 by 10 centimeters. It can be a sample of building materials or, for me, gorse. And then it gets heated by this conical structure. And it ignites. As it ignites, all of the gases once again go into the hood, into the pipe. This is a much smaller diameter pipe. The pipe for the large lab was about a meter across or so, whereas this one is probably, from the looks of it, about 15 centimeters, so a way smaller scale. But once again, the gases from the pipe get sampled into the little tubes over there and go into the red gas analyzer box to measure those 3 gases and figure out how the fuel actually burns.
Kate started out burning small amounts of gorse in this much smaller calorimeter before she moved downstairs to the big setup. The third part of her PhD will be conducting controlled experimental burns out in the field with Crown Research Institute Scion. And all of this work contributes to a program of research led by Andres that is looking at wildfires from all angles. Some in the research team are trying to understand the fundamentals of wildfire, like how wind and vegetation types shape the way a fire burns. This is where Kate's gorse burning work comes in, and we'll dive into that more in a moment. Another PhD candidate, Fergal Gill, is studying grass fires and modelling how they are spread by the wind. Others are examining fire impacts on people and infrastructure, and all of this data and information will feed into a virtual model of a city, what's called a digital twin, to help communities predict and prepare for wildfires. So back to Kate. Why burn gorse?
Gorse is a big fire hazard in New Zealand because it occupies vast areas on the landscape. It has fine particles. It also has a high volatile content, so it has resins and oils that are really flammable. And in addition, it also accumulates a lot of dead material as it grows, and dead material is usually very dry. So if you can imagine, if there is a lot of material and a lot of it is really dry, it will just go up in flame like what we saw earlier today.
Beyond the fire risk, gorse is a bit of a test subject for Kate. She wants to see if she can predict fire behaviour on a large landscape scale just by looking at those characteristics of the vegetation that's growing.
Ultimately, the vision with this is to be able to scan a landscape using satellites and take that data and understand what the vegetation characteristics are from the satellite data. So understand the moisture content, the particle size, the surface area to volume ratio, and take all of those fundamental variables and plug it into an equation and figure out how flammable that vegetation would be under given conditions if a fire were to ignite in a specific location on a specific day.
Some of those characteristics you said there, so like moisture content, so how dry it is, particle size, what does that look like on a plant?
So it's how fine the twigs are or the leaves are. So for instance, on a gorse, you have a lot of, really prickly little twigs. So that's like very fine particle sizes. And then you have larger stems that, like you pointed out downstairs in the lab, did not burn after a fire went by because fine particles are extremely flammable. So yeah, in my PhD, I am looking at the effect of moisture content and particle size and the structure of the shrub and the composition. So yeah, what the different twigs look like in order to understand the flammability of the shrub.
So far, she's revealed an interesting result. Dead gorse and live gorse burn very differently, even if they have the same moisture content.
I set both the moisture content of dead and live material to be the same, and the live material actually burned more vigorously and at a higher intensity, but interestingly enough, it took longer to ignite because the plant particles, the plant structure was intact, the cellular structure was intact. It took longer to ignite, but once it got going, then it produced more energy and burned at a faster rate. And the direct application of that would be that if a fire were to start or if there was a spark, the dead material is probably what will ignite first. However, once that dead material passes over the flame to the live material, then you get even higher intensity.
Kate is working with researchers at the Australian National University who are developing sensors for satellites. These will estimate the moisture content of vegetation as well as its structure and fuel type, all from space.
Then those two pieces of puzzle come together, where you have really detailed information about the vegetation on the landscape, and I provide really detailed information about how a plant would burn if it were to have particular properties. And once you put those two pieces together, you increase the predictive capabilities. You scan the whole landscape and you can run computer simulations and simulate different scenarios where if a fire were to start here on this particular day with this wind direction and these conditions and this specific topography in the area, how would the fire spread and where would it go?
For Kate, this theoretical and lab-based experimentation is grounded in real first-hand experience of the power of wildfires.
So I worked as a wildland firefighter in Canada for the British Columbia Forest Service, and it was the best job I ever had and it really ignited my passion for wildfire. So at the time, I had plant biology background, and then I just decided to get a job as a wildland firefighter after finishing the university, and I absolutely fell in love with fire. So it just raised so many questions, and I saw that a wildland fire is just such a complex phenomenon where there's just so many things happening all at the same time, and it's very difficult to get your head around it, and I got really fascinated with fires.
So wildland firefighter in particular, so you're not going to like house fire necessarily, like you're going out in the wilderness, big bushfires. Is that what the job is?
Exactly. I was specifically a wildland firefighter, so like fighting fires in grasslands and forests. And I lived on a fire base in a remote community in the northeastern British Columbia. So basically, we flew to fires in helicopters. And that summer, I probably spent more hours in a helicopter than I did in a vehicle.
And so when you were working over that season in British Columbia, how many different fires did you see?
I believe my crew went to 8 fires, and they were all multi-day fires. So basically, you get a call, you have to be ready within half an hour in the helicopter with the hose bags, with the pumps, with the chainsaw, with shovels, with all the hand tools, all of your personal gear. For personal gear, we just had little day packs with 3 days worth of clothing stuff because the food was separate. And then you get to the fire ground, you get to work. If the fire is taking longer to put out than 1 day, which was usually the case, in the evening you set up your tent and you overnight on the fire, wake up the next day, have your breakfast, go back to it until the job is done, and then you fly out in the helicopter back to base and wait for the next call.
I mean, is that quite spooky, scary, camping next to a large wildfire?
It is not, because British Columbia, so BC Forest Service, puts so much effort into safety. So they have top-notch communications. They really watch the fire behavior and the weather predictions. And if the conditions get too scary or too dangerous, the firefighters get pulled out right away.
What are you actually physically doing when you're putting out a fire like that?
It's a very hard physical work. So you have to carry heavy hose bags and pumps, like 20-kilogram hose bags, 20-kilogram pumps, to a place where you will be fighting the fire from. And then you find a water source, hook up the pump and get it running, and lay a hose line. So basically lay out your hoses and send the water through them. So basically pump water from the pump to the nozzle and then spray the fire with water. Put the wet stuff on the hot stuff.
And you're wearing, like, I guess, big fireproof gear as well?
Absolutely. So we all had a fire safety gear. So you have your leather boots with fireproof soles and Nomex clothing. So Nomex is a type of fabric that's fire resistant. It's not fireproof, but it's fire resistant. So trousers and shirt and hard hat with a face shield for chainsawing if you're going to chainsaw, and earmuffs for when you're running a pump, leather gloves, goggles. So all of the safety is covered. You generally try to keep away from large flames, and you attack the fire either from the back or from the flanks, so from the sides of the fire, because at the front of the fire the heat is so intense and the fire is spreading so quickly. It's insanely dangerous, and that's not a place where any human being should ever be. So yeah, the flame heights can get pretty high, but generally we kept away from really intense conditions, and we made sure we were attacking fire from a safe spot, so from the back and the sides. Yeah.
Canada is one of those countries grappling with big, destructive wildfires, alongside the US, Australia, some Mediterranean countries, and parts of South America. Kate's supervisor, Dr. Andres Valencia, says we're not quite at that level of danger in New Zealand, at least not yet.
For us, I think we have something close to 3,000-4,000 fires per year in different areas. The ones that are important, I mean, when I say important, I mean more in terms of communities, are the ones that happen close to the cities. So Port Hills, for example, Happy Valley in Wellington, Pigeon Valley. So there are a few fires that have taken place around the cities. I will say that if you compare the risk of wildfires in New Zealand with Australia or California or Canada, I will say that is low. However, what I think that is happening right now is that we're seeing an increase of wildfires happening close to the cities. So that's what is important. So now we start seeing those fires happening in locations in which most people can be affected.
What we do have now is a window of opportunity to prepare and figure out how best to protect property and biodiversity and lives. A chance to prepare for what we see coming in our climate future, rather than having to react as it happens.
The projections shows that the weather is going to be, let's say, leading to potentially more wildfires. We're going to have a longer fire seasons in the future because of the climate change that is happening. So our approach is more: we see the future, we think that we can prepare for it, rather than let's try to find solutions as it happens, right?
Thank you to Kate Melnick, Fergal Gill, and Dr. Andres Valencia from the University of Canterbury. You can check out a video of the gorse burning in the fire lab on our website, rnz.co.nz/OCW. This episode was produced by me, Ellen Rikers, with help from presenter and producer Claire Concannon. Sound engineering was by Mark Chesterman. Tēnā koe I whakarongo mai. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week. Kia pai te wiki.